what are some of the common customer challenges we've seen that kind of allows us to introduce BMC client management, or I'll probably say BCM from here on out, into an organization? I mean, you can read the screen, but I'll just kind of talk about some as well. And there's really probably about 5 different ones that I'd like to bring to your attention. One is understanding the client infrastructure. A lot of you guys said that you had a service desk in your environment today. You may have even said service core. So what that means is you're tracking changes, you're having incidents come in. A lot of times what we don't know, though, is how is it all connected? We're needing to do a change on this. What's that downstream effect? So some of what you will see, or I guess one of the issues, is understanding kind of what that infrastructure looks like, seeing those device relationships. So what we'll be able to see inside of BCM is what that topology looks like, what that connectivity looks like, not only from, let's say, the networks in there, but maybe even your switches and your routers, and then, of course, the BCM architecture itself. Second one is kind of enforcing IT policy compliance. So we set policies, but we really don't have a good way to enforce them. And this is actually going to be one of the things that I show in the demonstration as well, how you can set what your compliance needs to be on a device. So as an example, maybe it's PCI compliance. I need this set of patches. I need to make sure we're running this browser. I need to make sure the machines have this much memory. Those are policies that you can kind of set for your compliance and then evaluate your devices to see if they're matching that compliance. Managing remote devices behind a firewall. So often is the case, people come into the office, but often as well is the case where we have those road warriors. They don't ever come into one of our satellite offices. They don't ever make that VPN connection. How do we manage those devices? And with some of our architecture, we're going to still be able to address those clients as a part of BCM. Lifecycle management. So kind of that cradle to grave. Device comes in, we need to deploy the operating system, we need to deploy software. Those are all key functions of client management. And we'll see on the next slide kind of the tiles, or you will, the functionality that's included, and definitely software deployment, OS deployment is one of them. And finally, converging ITSM-based business processes. And so what that means is kind of like we saw before, or like I was talking about before, we may start a process in the service desk. Could be a user requesting, let's say, a piece of software. I need to get the approvals, but then just kind of continue that. Once I've got the approvals, then kick off the installation of that software and then finally close out that request. So really converging BCM with Service Core, or BCM to Remedy Force, or even BCM to Remedy. Those service desk applications converging with the tool that I'm using to do that software deployment is another challenge that we've seen in the industry. Okay, so looking at BMC client management, and the nice thing about this, although it looks like a lot of functionality, you've kind of split out in these tiles what's included with client management. And of course, the discovering inventory is something that's universal. Most applications are going to do that. But what BCM kind of brings into that forefront, some of the things that maybe are not mentioned, or they may be in other repositories, things like the software license management, doing that financial asset management, some of that policy compliance. Those are all under the umbrella of client management, and even more specifically, if we have to deploy that agent to the machine, all this functionality is included in that one agent. So really making it a simplified solution to manage those client devices. And don't get confused when it says client. I mean, a client could be a server, it could be a desktop, it could be a laptop. So it's not just client machines, it could be server machines as well. Okay? So how did they approach it? And when you look at this graphic, of course at the core is the inventory. So to be able to do any of these things, I have to understand what's in the environment. With BCM, kind of that initial discovery that I do can be agentless. And once I've done that and I decide, yes, let's say as an example, I went out there and I found switches and printers and routers and all that, but I also found some servers and some workstations. Perfect. I need to now deploy my agent on those servers and workstations. And so if you kind of start there at 12 o'clock, that initial thing, or kind of as the machine comes into the environment, the discovery, deploying the OS, maybe distributing some software, if included in my image is not anything to do the vulnerability, making sure that I have the latest patches, then that's kind of stage 2. Or as I'm progressing along this life cycle, I need to secure that device and ensure we don't have any vulnerabilities, opening that machine up to potential holes. And if we kind of keep going with respect to day-to-day management, right, so I've got that done, everything's smooth sailing. Without fail, someone's going to have something go on with the machine. I might have to do that remote desktop takeover, so that functionality also included. If you have initiatives around green IT, you'll notice there are the power policies. So while that is baked into the operating system, if I haven't flipped the switch, this allows me to do that remotely. So maybe at 6 o'clock, shutting the machines down so they're not still dragging on my power all night until the next day, which could be somewhere between 10 and 12 hours. So shutting that down. Again, just kind of being aware of the environment. You'll see there as well those financial relationships. So we'll see how you're able to tag all of that with a particular device, again, as a part of its life cycle. And then finally, at the conclusion, retiring that device, changing the status. If you're sending them off to charity, donating them to the schools, you can notate that in asset management so you know where that asset has gone. Okay. Purpose built. So really 3 things here. Scalability. There is the one agent that is going to connect to potentially the asset core server. It could be connecting to a relay, but it has that intelligence built in. The integration into your Active Directory. So a lot of times an Active Directory has your groups already created. What we're able to do is piggyback upon those groups. So when we start to target groups for a particular software or patch, we can utilize your existing AD groups that you've created so you don't have to start from scratch. Simplicity. So I mentioned the single agent. I mentioned the ability to do an agentless discovery, and then for the ongoing management, I'm putting that agent down, but understand all those tiles that we saw in that slide that talked about the solution. That's all baked into that one agent. The other nice thing I like about BCM is this concept of automated wizards. And while you may have some familiarity with software, you figure, well, I know software, I've been doing it for several years, this couldn't be that difficult. Every systems management solution does it just a little bit different. And so what BCM has implemented are these wizards where you're really telling it, I need to do a discovery, and then it's going to walk you through a wizard. So in that sense, it becomes very easy to use, very intuitive. Last part, security. So I've talked about how I can use that one solution to manage, let's say, all my client devices. If I'm going to do my servers, maybe it's managing those as well. But now what I want to do is, let's say I have a division on the West Coast, I have a division on the East Coast, but I'm still using one tool across both of those. What I can do is say I have a set of administrators on the West Coast, and I only want them to touch the West Coast machines, and the same on the East Coast. So I'm having one tool, but it's serving multiple functions for my different groups. And inside of the console now, I can start to divvy up from a security perspective what an administrator or what that IT staff member is going to be able to do when they come into that console. Okay? So one quick one on the topology. If you take your eyes to the center, I have at my core something called a master server. And this master server can have that convergence to my service desk server. So again, that may be service core, it could be the Remedy Force, could be Remedy. But those two, that means that from one of my service desk tickets, I'm going to be able to launch into Asset Core, and any of those functions that I saw before, do that from a ticket. So I don't have to swivel out of my ticket to resolve an issue that requires some type of systems management. I have that functionality baked into my ticket. what you'll see just south of the server there, the core server, are client devices. And so those client devices can connect directly into the Asset Core server, or, the client management server, or you'll notice here on the left, I have what's called a relay. And the relay is a part of the infrastructure that really helps me be more efficient with my distributions. And so if we have thousands of machines out there on the network, I don't want everyone to hit my core server at once, let's say for a patch update. That's why I employ my relays, because I'm basically sending it once to this relay, and then this West Coast relay is going to service Los Angeles and Phoenix. And then you'll see that same structure with respect to the East Coast. The other thing, and I mentioned this before, is the idea of that remote user or that road warrior who never makes a VPN connection. I can still manage those clients by putting some of my infrastructure technology into the DMZ. So again, and they're not required to make that VPN or make it look like they're on our network. I'm going to be able to manage them so long as they have a valid IP address. Okay, so now if we start looking at some of the functionality. Inventory management, you'll understand that's at the core. So in addition to doing or discovering my computers, I can look at switches, routers, printers, etc. And this is the one I'm going to start off in. And at this point, let me kind of break off into my demonstration environment, and I've landed in my client management console. And what you'll notice here on the bottom right is the concept of wizards and this instant expert. This wizards is what I was alluding to, that's simplifying and making this very intuitive for your technicians to manage client management. So here we're talking about doing that asset discovery because I need to understand what's in my environment. So you'll notice there's a wizard for that. So here I have this asset discovery. And I'll bring this up just so you can get a feel. I've already ran the discovery, so we're going to go and look at the results. But here you'll notice on the left I've got 11 steps. And really at this point, if I opted for automatic, those are the only two things that I would need to fill out. I'm going to switch this and say configurable, and then you'll notice some other steps light up for me. So at this point, I'll hit next, and I'm going to, for the second bullet in, I'm going to say create a new scan configuration. And when I do that, you may have noticed some additional things lit up for me, but I can be very specific at this point if I want to look at Windows or do my discovery for Windows machines, Unix, Linux, Mac machines, maybe it's my printers, my routers, my switches. And when you opt to do the printers and the routers and the switches, what that's going to do is build that topology for you so you can see what devices are into a given switch, potentially what port are they on that switch. So that you'll start to see if you opt for, like that third bullet in talking about the printers, routers, switches. The last couple bullets there have to do with your virtual environment. So if that's something that you want us to discover, again, we can see that. And again, from a topology perspective, it's going to show you which machines are running on a given virtual host. Okay, so the last couple things here, this target list is just going to allow me to search a certain part of my network. You can leave it wide open. You can look at your Active Directory groups. Maybe that's something that you target, but you have some flexibility there. And the last option here is the ability to schedule this. So if this is something that you want to happen with some type of frequency, daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly, you can put that on a schedule and forget about it. I'm going to hit cancel and just kind of go ahead and look at what this found. But from that simplicity perspective, I've done the management, right? The management was creating that asset discovery. Now I need to do a task like look at my inventory. So at this point, I would switch over to my instant expert, and you'll notice I have a task here that lets me browse the inventory. And what that's going to do is jump me over into the console right to my device topology so I can view what it is we just discovered. Before I do that, I'm going to back up one step and look at this asset discovery. And what you'll see here, it's looking at my discovered devices. And what I can see, I've sorted this by type. You'll remember one of those screens when I when I selected the Windows, the Mac, the printers, then one of the next steps was going to ask me for my credentials for each of those environments. So even if I don't enter credentials, I can still see that something is responding at this 10.5.93.68 address. I just can't make out the type or what the operating system is.